We've reached 20 episodes. Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the Livin The Dream video podcast. I'm Rishi Barran. I've been at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting for just about 5 years now. We're right there. So looking forward to that anniversary. And during that time, I've had a chance to encounter numerous wonderful people, fantastic students, fantastic broadcasters. And no exception to that is the one and only Jackson McCarty, who graduated the program when he was in his teens, and he's already in a short period of time making a big difference. Jackson, thank you for your time today.
And Rishi, like I told you whenever you first text me about it, I really appreciate you considering me for it.
Well, you have earned that right, Jackson. Jackson has worked in Wyoming now for, I think you're closing in on a couple of years now. He's in Cheyenne, Wyoming at WGWN TV, part of Wyoming News Now. Started there doing some news and sports. Now he's doing all sports, but he's an anchor reporter, and he gave me a new acronym that I hadn't heard before today. He said he was MSJ, which means multi-sports journalist, right?
Yes, sir. So basically my role is transformed to where I used to on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays do, VOSOTs and packages on the news side of stuff. But now it's going out and shooting games. It's getting packages on the sports side of stuff. It's just kind of taking what I learned from probably, 14 months of doing MMJ work and just bringing it right over and trying to improve our sports department through that.
Well, he has done it all there. That's to be said. We'll get into that a little bit, but let's start with, where did the whole dream of being a sportscaster start for you?
Yeah, so I was probably about 12, 13 years old. And, I'm from Arkansas, southern portion of the country. And so a tradition every Saturday, we'd go over to my dad's buddy's house, and him and his buddies, we'd all watch college football. And so that was a thing all growing up through my lifetime. And, just kind of on a whim, one of his buddies had kind of pointed at the TV and was like, "That's going to be you one of these days." And before he had ever said that, I didn't even know that was a possibility. I'm young at that point. I'm thinking like, the only jobs that I really know exist are the ones that like my parents do and that like I come into contact with every day. But whenever he was like, "Yeah, that could be you," and it kind of took me aback, and I was kind of hooked on that idea, to be honest. It was one of those that once it was put out there, I was like, oh, well, if that's an option, I'm gonna do that. Like if that's on the table, then I'm taking it. And so that kind of started a journey that has led me out to here. Obviously led me through Full Sail and led me through a bunch of different opportunities that I've tried to use to make myself both the best possible version of a sportscaster that I can be, but also just the best version of myself.
I don't know if you remember this, Jackson, but I like to drive into work sometimes, play the license plate game. And I was always excited to get to the parking lot and see your Arkansas plate, because that was one that would count. It wasn't always the easiest one to get, but you're from Paragould, Arkansas. Just learned a couple minutes ago, the only one in the world, and about an hour and a half from Memphis, close to the Missouri border. You didn't have professional sports teams where you were, at least that close, but what was life like growing up where you did?
So, really it gave me an opportunity to, typically you grow up in at least a region close enough to a team to where you gravitate towards those teams. But for me, a lot of my early sports fandom was watching every team. Like I ended up being a Washington Commanders fan in the NFL, but some of my fondest memories were like Steven Jackson from the at that point St. Louis Rams rather, and players like Roddy White from Atlanta, and like just guys that you gravitate to because you don't have a team. That young, I already knew I did not like the Cowboys, which was the typical trend out there. But it gave you an opportunity to really enjoy the game more than a team, where I believe that's kind of led me to have an interesting dynamic, just how I watch sports in general, because even though I do have teams now, I don't really grab a hold of that narrative of loyalty, in a sense that like blinding loyalty to my team, because I did grow up trying to watch everything. And, that was just kind of what you did out there. And obviously football is huge out there. Like I mentioned, every Saturday it was college football. And every Sunday, me and my dad, we actually have two recliners in our living room that it's the two recliners. There's a little table in between it and the TV straight forward. As soon as 11 a.m. hit, so we would watch the Fox Sports pregame. Me and my dad would sit down, and until the late game was about to start, we sat there. We watched, if one of our teams was on at that period, we were watching them, but if not, it was flipping between games and, on Sunday Ticket bouncing through. And I have a lot of fond memories of being out there because it kept everything so open for me. It gave me an opportunity to really test the waters all the way across the board.
I know eventually that love grew into the development of prospects too. And every time we talk, I generally ask you some NFL prospect related question because that became your thing. I know you had mentioned at one point, you even thought about, hey, maybe I could even be a scout, that kind of thing. But where did that love of the process of prospects and identifying draft players and things like that, where did that start for you?
Kind of in the same vein, on Saturdays, you're just watching so many different players. And when you're a kid, you hear your dad's friends saying, oh, Brady Quinn's better than this guy, or, whatever it is. And you really get to sitting down and watching it, and you're trying to evaluate it. And obviously that young, it's just who can throw the football farther, who can do whatever. But the older I get, it became more about who has more potential and, what does this person, bring on and off the field, and how does the league moving for these players. And I got so fascinated in the uncertainty of the NFL draft because I love sport. If there are two athletes competing over something, I will watch it. It's just kind of become this nature of competition that I've just fallen in love with. But on the other side of that, with the NFL draft, there's so much more that you don't truly know that I got really hooked on because I like the idea of these different possibilities. Like we had mentioned last time we had just talked to catch up, we were talking about the quarterbacks, and somebody I have found myself fascinated with this year is Anthony Richardson. And so much of that is because I truly believe that he could be, if he is drafted to, let's say, the Indianapolis Colts, I think he could be a top 10 quarterback in this league. If he gets drafted by the Carolina Panthers, I think he could be out of the league in 4 years. Like the fascination with these storylines that partially from your imagination, but partially from what you're seeing is just so captivating to me that there's just so many different ways that everybody's life can go and how their careers can go it's just been something that I love, even though I don't get paid to do it by any means. I will literally last night, I got bored because I was being a little restless last night, and I just started watching tape. Like I was watching Jalen Hyatt's tape just because I couldn't sleep, and was like, let's see what I think about this guy. So it's just something that has become part of my everyday life, to be honest with you, because based on scouting players and based on, trying to figure out how these guys can be their best versions of themselves, I've applied to me because, there are traits and skills and, things that you want to have in this industry that have parallels. So I kind of look at myself as a prospect in many ways, especially compared to my job. And, it's just something that has evolved from casual viewing to a very core factor in my life.
Well, then we'll have to have you evaluate yourself as a prospect later in this conversation. But you mentioned having conversations at a young age that made you think, that's pretty cool that could be a job. I know you took a class at Greene County Tech, right? That's where you went to high school?
Yes, sir.
I know you took a class there, or a series of classes there that were broadcast related. Take us through that experience and how that helped establish the path that you took.
Yeah. So the program, which we called Tech TV, was a 4-year thing. You started as a freshman and as a senior, and the first year is entirely, or the first 6 months, first semester is entirely the history of broadcast television. So you learn about Philo T. Farnsworth and inventing I believe he invented television. It's been a while. I need to brush back up. But Philo T. Farnsworth and going through like how everything got established and the process of where we are today in television, and then that back semester and then the rest of your career, you're working on your camera skills, and you have so many different options and avenues through that because our teacher, Miss Andrews, who I still hold a great deal of respect for, actually not too long ago went back and me and my former play-by-play guy that I did football and basketball with in high school talked to her current students about, being in the industry because he now shoots like commercial footage and stuff. So you got to work with a camera, you got to work on how to make a story through podcasting and packages and VOSOTs. And, I called games for 2 years for football and basketball. And, seeing how many different options there were, even just through my high school venture. And, it really opened my eyes, especially even before hitting the program that I'm sure we'll get to talk about the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting here in a second. But it opened my eyes that even if there's a certain avenue of it that I thought I might not love, there's 20 million different ways you can go about it. And, that class really did start me off on that journey. And I will admit, the first semester, I was a little skeptical because I didn't get to touch a camera. I didn't get to do the sports side of stuff that I obviously was drawn to. But I'm glad I kept pushing through it and kept pursuing it because it really did end up being a very good experience for me.
What did you like best about broadcasting at that point?
Me and Miss Andrews used to go kind of round and round about it because she wanted, she came from a traditional news background side of stuff. So she wanted more news, news packages and news whatevers. But my side, I wanted to do more sports. And so that really got to go through the more so the calling of games and an internship that I actually got through that with a local radio station. So I would say probably the games at that point, but I was definitely fascinated with how to make a story. Then I got to do some of that through the package work.
We're talking to Jackson McCarty from Wyoming News Now in Cheyenne, where he has been for about a year and a half, right? A little bit more than that.
Yes, sir. A year and 7 months now, I think. The 27th, I believe, of March would be my 1 year and 8 months. So yeah, we'll be inside of that by the time this comes out.
Well, after high school and all that, you decided to come our way, and you were a young man at that point. You're still a young man, but you were a very young man at that point. How'd you find out about Full Sail, and what made you want to come?
Well, I found out about it through Instagram ads because I definitely subscribe to that belief that your phone listens to you because, all I talked about with my buddies ever was sports and talking about that I was going to try to make this dream a reality at some point. And I found it through I was just scrolling on Instagram one day and I saw it. So I ended up doing some research on it, kind of talking to my dad about it. And, the conversation with my dad was only about 15, 20 minutes long. And then he was just like, well, did they do tours or, visits or whatever? And we got into looking at that. And this would have been probably November of 2018. And so he's like, okay, they have one in January of 2019. Let's go. And so before I knew it, we flew out to Orlando and ended up in Winter Park and got to tour it. And by the time, I'd kind of laid eyes on the program and got to talk to some of the folks that ended up, being my teachers. Gus was the one that I remember talking to the most about that. I knew that there wasn't anywhere that was going to offer me the same level of education from experience and also get out there and work, because the 4-year system did not interest me in the slightest. I come from a family, both of my parents owned at one point in time their own businesses. And, really, as soon as I got out of high school, got to work to put food on the table and, get things established. So, sitting around for 4 years where I knew that the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting could do that same thing for me in 20, I latched on. And from then it was go time.
Was that the regular tour they do on campus, or was it the behind the scenes that you went to?
Behind the scenes. So we got to do the desk, which actually whoever was running production, I think they were trying to bomb, or they were like trying to mess with some students just to see like what the reaction was, I think.
We usually save that for the program.
So I don't think they did for me, because on my BTS tour, the prompter was scrolling about that fast and I was trying to keep reading, so had to flip down to the paper scripts on it. But yeah, it was a cool experience to at least be on the desk. Of course, you're nervous as all get out because you think you're just going for a presentation as to why you should go here, and all of a sudden you're on the desk. But I think that's a representation of what the school ended up being.
I think I remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you coming in with the rest of your classmates to a room near where Gus's office was. And that was kind of your introduction to the program when you got to campus. I think I was there that day when you came in, and, it was at the time one of the bigger groups. I think it was the biggest group we had at the time. And there's a bunch of different people from a bunch of different places. What were you thinking at that moment when you're in that group with all these other people from around the country who had dreams similar to what you had?
To be honest, I was kind of alarmed a little bit. Like I knew the program was going to get bigger because it was pretty much in its infancy whenever I had first learned about it. But we had 32, I believe, in that room with us, not including obviously teachers. But it was like, at that point, it was kind of like okay, I've got, people that I'm going to learn from, and people that hopefully I grow close with, and that I get to, do this journey with. But also I've got healthy competition, because, you do want to, like, I personally, I think it's a healthy habit that you want to be the best person in the room to a certain extent, but also you don't want to at the start, because you need something to work up to. So not knowing where everybody was other than Ellie, because me and Ellie were actually on the same behind the scenes tour. So I knew she was pretty solid, but it gave me a lot of optimism that I was going to have a group of folks that I would both be able to learn from and, improve off of.
I think I remember you telling me too that when you had like intro to sportscasting, that at that point you were kind of focused on yourself and I want to stand out, and you didn't necessarily go out of your way as much then to get to know the other guys as well. And then I know by the end of the program, you were the opposite. You were trying to help everybody. You were friends, built so many great friendships. What was that transition like for you from, all right, I'm trying to find my way, to now being Mr. Friendly Guy with everybody?
So it takes me a while to warm up to people. Like, whenever I first got there, I had met somebody I'm still very good friends with, Carson. He was actually on the music production side of stuff, and me and him and Chris Post, who was on the photography side of stuff, were all really close buddies. And that was kind of my core group, definitely through intro. And then once it kind of detached, because we all had the same, first 3 or 4 months or whatever that was of classes. So once it kind of was me out on the island, I kind of had to warm up a little bit more to people, because I didn't want to go it alone entirely. Like I knew that the point of me being there was to focus on myself and get myself where I needed to be. But it's so much more enjoyable if you're also helping other people get to that same goal. And, hanging out with Ellie and Chris Spar and Landon Potvin and Cam Champagne, Garrison Alston, like those are folks that I ended up graduating with and have fond memories of, because as the program kept going and I started to see, where both I can improve and where they can improve, and, maybe those kind of align perfectly to where, maybe I'm better at writing where somebody's better at on-air presenting. You work on that, and you talk to them, and you get to do, group assignments or whatever. And it all just kind of fell together where, the group kept getting smaller to where there was this kind of bond and this like brother and sisterhood that you didn't want to have anybody fail by the end of it, just because it was so connected and you'd been through 20 months of being a team that one person failing was all of us failing.
You were also very young when you came to us. You were very young when you graduated. How old were you when you graduated?
So actually, it cracks me up, because I was 19 years old whenever I got my diploma, but our graduation ceremony was May 7th. My birthday is May 8th. So I was one day away from being 20 whenever I got my diploma.
So when you come to our program, and you had said you wanted the fast pace, you wanted to be done quickly, but you're also from a maturity level still growing. What was it like as being so young? So that would mean you were probably 17 when you came to us, or were you early 18?
I just turned 18, yeah, because I'd gotten there. I started in September. So from a maturity level, that was by far the scariest thing for me, because that's Winter Park is 13 hours from my hometown. So, and I tell this story now. I was embarrassed kind of whenever it first happened, but my dad helped me move down, dropped all my stuff off. But whenever it finally came, he was like, okay, Jackson, you've got like 4 days until the orientation week. I'm going to go ahead and go back so that way you can get comfortable in your apartment. He leaves at like, I don't know, 5 or 6 in the morning. So I get up, say bye to him. I go to the bathroom and I throw up because all of these nerves, hit me, because it wasn't real that I was, kind of out on my island. And, got rid of that, sat back down on my bed, took a deep breath and said, I'm going to be okay. And that's something that I reflect back on, even coming out here and potentially the job search starting up soon. And like, you're going to be okay. Like you're nervous, but it's not the end of the world, because things are going to keep moving and things are going to fall where they're going to fall. And that's something that I take a lot of comfort in remembering, even though it's not a story that, 2-3 months after it happened, I was particularly, very sharing of.
Well, you've come a long way since then, and you've learned a lot. What are some of your best memories of your time in the program as you develop?
So, man, that's a good one. I always loved being in the studio, just because, being an on-air personality, that was the thing that I knew I wanted to do, in some facet. But funny enough, whenever like we would have our, whenever we in your class, we would take our actual assignments and put them on air, our 3 and 5 minute shows that we do, sitting in that back room with everybody and talking about how they thought they did, or, because we'd bring like Chick-fil-A or whatever and be just kind of talking and relaxing before we were going on air or whatever. That is definitely a core memory of mine. Another one, just because I love Gordy so much. Gordy is still one of my favorite people, but whenever we went out there and he would like walk behind us, and whenever we were doing our live shots, that's another one that cracks me up, because it's the most Gordy Hershiser thing I've ever seen. But just the different ways that we went through the program, and like even with COVID and stuff, like going through it and managing to make it through and always ending up seeing those people again and having good times. That's really what I remember most about it.
You brought up the back room. I've always been curious about that, because I'm not there. So
Right.
what goes on in the back room? What are the conversations like back there?
It's a lot of Netflix watching. It's a lot of talking about what your actual show was, seeing if everybody's free to go get food afterwards, poking fun at each other, just trying to be lighthearted, or as lighthearted as you can, because we all know it's stressful. Every single one of us is going out on air, for what is one of the first of a handful of times. And you're just trying to remember that it's not the end of the world. And so you're just trying to, you're being yourself, really, is what it is. You're just trying to be the friends that you have been, with, or, inside that classroom or outside of it. So it's entirely just trying to stay as relaxed as you possibly can.
What skills and things you learned from the program did you find to be the most important?
Patience. Patience is a huge one for me, because I before I got in there, like you'd mentioned, I was 18 years old. I was not a patient individual by any means. I was very, let's go in here, do what we need to do, get out, but by the end of it, you're more used to working with other people at their speed, and knowing that it doesn't always have to be your way to be the best way. And that was something that just kept developing through the program. Something I reflect back on was, we had a segment, I believe it was in your class, where it was a non-scripted, two-shot, just like back and forth, like debate show type thing. And me and Chris Barr were doing that because we were talking NFL. And I remember me and him sat down a couple days prior and we're trying to figure out, what topics do we want to do and how do we want to go about this? And I had come in with a pretty strong idea of what we were going to do. And he was actually like, let's take, these two out and put this in and kind of rearrange this. And I kind of got to looking at it. And at first I was kind of hesitant, but he said, you just take an hour or two, look at it. And by the end of it, I was like, no, I absolutely agree that this is how we need to do it. So, it definitely helped me improve in that way. And I think kind of by osmosis, better leadership through that as well.
We're talking to Jackson McCarty from KGWN in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Jackson, what did it mean to you to graduate from the program?
It meant a lot because there were definitely points in time where I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I mentioned it earlier, but COVID early was a scary situation. I went back to Paragould for 2 months of that, just to, try to calm down, be with the family, try to make sure everything was going to be all right, that we didn't need to pause or delay any of it. But, I whenever I got there, I wasn't sure I was ever coming back to my apartment in Winter Park, other than to empty the stuff out and leave. So to know that we got through that, and because I kept my intro to sportscasting video because that was the first, or that was the first time we were on air, but also a big gap between that because we didn't get to do Michael Stenson's on-air assignment because we got canceled during that, and anything in between there we didn't really get to do. So I liked having that footage that not only did we survive, but we made so many evolutions through that, and to kind of see it all come to fruition, and to know that it was time to start being out here and really getting to work was very gratifying.
How did you handle the challenges that came with COVID, of having it taken away and then having to come back in a little bit of a different environment to start, and then gradually getting back to where you did by the end?
It was definitely hard, especially at first. Through those first 2 months, I was not in the best headspace by any means, because it was, you go out in your living room, you do your couple hours of class, and then you put the camera, or you put your computer up, and that's it. And I didn't personally have that blueprint of keep working and keep pushing through it. I got very negative. But by the time I was back in Winter Park, with Chris and Cam and all them guys, it had fixed right back up, because you really just needed to be around people who are also trying to achieve those things. And, and I keep saying it, it's kind of a personal slogan, but on my island, like once I got off my island, I felt a lot better and started to push through. And then when we first got back on campus for a class, everything opened back up. Like my whole mindset changed, because it was like, we lost this once, I'm not losing it again. So it was challenging at first, absolutely. But by the end of it, I would almost call it a blessing.
Everybody operates differently, but I think there's something really to be said for having that support and having others that have your back and have that. So even if you're someone who's independent, I think it's good to try to find that, because that motivation helps, and that bonding and just that comfort helps a great deal. You brought up patience earlier.
Yes.
Now you get the job search, and I know you had to exercise a little bit of patience with that. What was the job search like for you?
It was definitely, that tested my patience, like you mentioned, because it took me about 2 months before I ended up locking Cheyenne, Wyoming down and knowing that this is where I was going to be. But, I talked to you about, people that you knew in the industry that might have ideas on that. And, we actually, I think you would remember this, me and Taylor Schaub had communicated, and I almost went and worked out in Bakersfield. Now that would have been an entirely news job. So I do kind of count my blessings in that. I really appreciate Taylor for talking to me. And, I think that experience was great just as a whole, to kind of get a better understanding of what employers are looking for. But, yeah, it was just every day getting on these different Gray and Nexstar and Sinclair and whoever, and just applying to anything and everything, and not hearing the phone ring was scary. But once that call finally came in with Cheyenne, it kind of it all reset right back. It was kind of like deciding to go to Full Sail, because it was like, okay, next step, next thing to move on to. And it was worth the wait, I would say.
What advice do you have for our soon-to-be graduates, and maybe people who've already graduated that are still looking for that work? What advice do you have for them based on your experiences that you think will help them to have success?
Don't be afraid to take a position that might not be exactly what you want right now, but something you could see yourself eventually getting to the spot you want there. Like for me, for myself, like I was doing, whenever I first got here, that MMJ stuff, but also the anchor trained me. So I've done the morning shows, the noon shows, the 5 and 5:30 and the 10. I've done every single show we have. I've done the weekends. Actually, funny enough, 2 weekends ago, I had to do the news anchoring spot and have my Casper reporter step in to the sports role because we had a staffing issue. But I've tried to communicate best I can with our production team and figuring out what works best for them and how things look best on television. And you really need to get everything that you can out of every situation. And even if it's not the spot that you want to be immediately, like there's always a chance for, if you step up and you do what needs to be done and you do it the right way, you can always grow through that and you can get where you want to be. Somebody I don't talk to him just too terribly much, but I think KJ Doyle is a really good example of that, because he was working as a producer, I believe, and now he's the number one sports guy in Amarillo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think producing was what he wanted to do, but it's all about experience. I mean, we always made the joke that everybody wants 2 years of experience, so you can't get any to begin with. But you can, through different avenues, and show that you are a team player, which I do think is maybe the most attractive quality for especially a learning station. Somewhere early, if you are willing to not only improve yourself, but also improve the quality of every single newscast that you are involved in, and every time that you step in the door, it's going to be hard for somebody not to seriously look in your direction.
Well, you had a big decision to make because you were, I believe, offered a kind of a hybrid role, right? A little news, a little sports, and you're moving to a place that I don't know if you've ever been to Cheyenne before. I know I haven't been there. I haven't been to the state of Wyoming. I know my first job that I took on air, I had never been to the states of Iowa and Missouri, and I drove out there, and it was a little bit of a culture shock to begin with, but in a good way. What gave you the confidence to step outside of your comfort zone and take the job you did?
Because I'd already done it, to Florida. Like the blueprint, I had made the blueprint. I didn't even mean to, but and granted, palm trees a little bit different than mountains, but it was a situation where it was already going to be such a giant culture shock, as far as going from the rural, not a whole lot goes on, to 10 minutes from Orlando, and just this overwhelming abundance of everything in Winter Park. So funny enough, going to Cheyenne was significantly closer to going back home, because it is a much more connected area. There's a lot more just community, I would say, just kind of a tied in togetherness there, that it was so it was, yeah, obviously it was weird to have to go out there and to move to the mountains, because I had personally never seen mountains like that in my life. I'd never been farther west than Dallas, Texas before I moved out here. So that obviously a little different. The winter, not my favorite thing, but it wasn't anything compared to moving out as an 18-year-old 13 hours away from anybody.
Well, you did it. You are where you are now. What's it like to be living the dream?
It's, I've not, I've taken some time to reflect on it because on my off days, I do genuinely, I like to carve out about an hour to sit down and, kind of like we had mentioned the prospect thing, kind of look at where I'm at and try to figure out where I've come from and where I've gone and, how I keep advancing. So to know that I can sit here on my off days every week and think I get my job is going and watching sports and recording it and talking about it. That just saying that out loud like almost freaks me out, to be honest with you, because it doesn't sound real. It's not something like, obviously it was something I've been chasing since I was 14 years old, but it didn't seem it, and it still doesn't really seem like it's an actual thing because it doesn't feel like work more often than not. And I like buddies back home will text me and be like, how's the job going or whatever. And I'll just joke with them like, yeah, I'm miserable. They've got me out at this baseball game at 12:30 and I'm just hanging out in 75-degree weather recording baseball and I'm getting paid for it. Like I don't know how it's one of those things that anytime anybody asks me, I'm genuinely prideful in it because there's nothing else I'd rather be doing.
I'm glad you're having so much fun, and that's what it's all about. And you always have a really positive attitude, which I think has helped you with a lot of the transitions that you've made in a short period of time. We talked a little bit about the news side of things. How does the news experience help you with the sports?
Genuinely, I think that being an MMJ for those that year and some change is more beneficial to my evolution in sports than my weekend anchor role was for that same amount of time, because you don't like, obviously it's easy to get caught up and say, okay, I went to this game, I'm cutting these highlights, I'm going to talk for a couple minutes, that's it. But on the MMJ side, now what I get to do as an MSJ is entirely getting to know people and figuring out what the story is and just bearing down on who you are, why you're significant, and why people want to know more about you. And that has completely parlayed itself over into the reporting that I do for sports now. Like, I would have, there's stories that if I could go back and do them, if I could just get a fresh start on them, I would feel so much better about just the fact that I'm trying to think of how to say it. The tools that I got from being an MMJ, the more that I developed them by the end of it, I would love to just go back and give that a second chance. And there's stories like, I've got a link to it on my YouTube, but there's a story that I did on Pine Bluffs high school football and basketball that was the first football game I ever went to, Pine Bluffs High School. And it's a rural town. It's like 800 people, I think. It's a 1A 9-man football school. And that was my first assignment I got sent out to on a Friday. And this year they won the 9-man state football and they won the 2A basketball. And I've gotten to know those kids really well. I've gotten to see them develop as athletes. I've gotten to see all that come together. So that's probably the piece I'm most proud of, just because it's kind of a collective, representation of what my journey has been like here. And I don't think I would have done that story half the justice it deserved if I wouldn't have spent that time as an MMJ.
What's your goal when you're putting a story together?
My goal is to talk as little as I possibly can. And I know that, that I don't want that to sound lazy or anything, but the story is best told by the people who lived it. And so whenever I go do my interviews, the day and days before, I will spend as much time as I can saying, what can I ask them that means so much more for them to say than for me to say? Where are the soft spots in this story that I cannot tell? And, trying to build around the concept of, like, let's say my buddy Alex Eisman, who's our weekday guy, he recently did a story on Colin Newton, who just tore his leg up in his senior season of football, ended his high school career, and he did a story on his rehab. And I was helping him plan for that. And I told him, like, he had a couple different questions on there, and I'm like, those are good for background for you to say, but you need to add more why questions. You need to find what the feeling is there, and how to evoke that from him, because you cannot tell that. So that is the number one thing that I come in anytime I'm doing a story thinking, how do I achieve that?
I agree and I say this, I said it yesterday, actually. Sound bites are meant for emotion and expertise, right? You're going to someone because they have an emotional connection to the topic, whatever it is, because they know something based on whatever position they're in that gives to it. Your tracks are for the kind of the nuts and bolts, the stuff they can't tell you, or I guess they could tell you, but it's kind of connecting one emotion to another is what a story is, and
Right.
doing it in a way that's logical.
I call us the bridge. Like when we're a package, I tell Alex to be the bridge, because you are not the story. There's certain times that, and there's varying opinions on this, but with look lives inside packages and stand-ups, like there are certain stories that he's come to me about, and he's like, well, what do you think about this for a stand-up in this? I'm like, I don't think you should have a stand-up at all, because there are some stories that absolutely put yourself in, be part of it, because you're kind of representing the community in that sense. But in different stories, you don't need to be any more involved in this than lending your voice to tell somebody else's story. So yeah, it's one of those that obviously you have to have a certain amount of I don't want to say self-obsession, but like you have to be, to a certain extent, very willing to put yourself out there and want to be on camera to be in this job. But in packages and feature stories, you have to take that out of yourself, because it ain't about you.
What's it like providing hyper local sports coverage? Because I know a lot of people, and you may have been in this list included, come to school and they think, oh yeah, it's all about covering the pro teams and the big level college teams. And obviously you've got some college teams you cover, but to cover hyper local in an area that doesn't have professional teams, how do you go about that?
You're gonna hear when you're not doing well about it, and it's honestly my biggest driver in that, because not getting backlash from not hitting specific schools, or thinking you have a bias or whatever. It's a very real thing that people perceive through television. Now, I don't personally think we're doing it, but you have to find ways to make everybody in the community feel like they are involved in the community and being represented on television within the community. So finding where kind of, for one, a big thing that I found was helpful was finding the sports hierarchy of what they watch and what their connection was, but also just keeping it as light as possible, because they're kids. They're your viewers' kids. They're not pro level athletes. You don't get to you don't really get to go all in on their process and critique them, because they're still trying to figure out how to be humans and try to be adults. Like figuring out that line to walk of both sports coverage, but also remembering they're human is the biggest thing to try to balance. And I think once you get comfortable with that, it takes you up so many different levels.
It's easy to forget about that when you're trying to break a big story or have a big story, and you forget that the people that you're talking to, they're human beings as well. And sometimes you need to focus on that. I'm glad you do that and that you've already figured that out. What have you seen as your biggest areas of growth so far?
Through the program, or
since you've been working in Wyoming?
So I would say definitely leadership. Again, that's something that I hope I never stop working on, because that's something I pride myself in. And then a large catalyst for improvement there was when my news director went on maternity leave, that we really didn't have much stability, at the top. So I stepped in there as best I could. We had an interim, but he would kind of bounce between the bureau station and in Cheyenne. So whenever he wasn't here, I was focusing on making sure everybody was being held accountable, but also, not getting too lost in the job, because you can't. That's another thing that's so important, is not getting too caught up in your stories, which I do personally. That's another thing I think I've grown on, is remembering that you still have to be you. You're not your work at all points in time, because I think through college, and I started to figure that out more at the end, but I was very obsessed with the idea that my work is me and represents me. And that's not the case, because you're going to mess up. It's human error. It happens. You have to remember that that is not the greatest version of you, and you have to keep working towards the greatest version of you. And sometimes that does include stepping away from work, so that way you can recharge and get closer to that mental aspect of being at your peak. So most of my growth, while my storytelling is probably my most transferable on air, because I think my writing and writing for TV as opposed to writing for like just to write like I used to do in college. I did the thing called Discuss the Game, which was just a free basically journal entry where you could just write about sports topics and whatever. But writing to connect in a shorter frame, those would be my big ones on air. But a lot of what I try to focus on every day is off camera.
I like that you talk about stepping away when you need to and disconnecting when you need to. And that's hard to do, especially young, because you want to build, you want to grow, you want to move up. And I think that, yes, I think you are able to maybe focus more all in on work when you're young and growing up in the business than you will be able to in maybe 5-10 years. And I think that's fine to some degree, but I also think you got to take care of yourself. And that leads me to another question, going to a place where you don't know anybody and trying to adapt socially and just as a growing adult in a new community. What advice do you have for others going into that situation of how to get by and enjoy your time in a place where maybe you're not going to be spending a super long amount of time?
For me personally, I find the most important thing to me, both whenever I got out there in Orlando, whenever I got out here, I find that before I find any friends, before I find any, like super connection to the community, food. I find food that I enjoy, because if you can find consistent places that you like to eat that make you feel comfortable, that does so much. And maybe that's just a me thing, so that might not be applicable for everybody. But Jimmy Hula's down in Winter Park, that was my place. Me, Chris, Ellie, Cam, Garrison, Potvin, like we would all go there all the time, because that was our spot where it was like everything's all right, because we're just having our burger, we're just having our tacos, we're just doing whatever, we're relaxed, we're gonna make it. And food out here, there's Sanford's Grub and Pub, two doors down. Like there's food out here that I have absolutely done that with, because if I do feel overwhelmed or whatever, I'll go to one of those places and just eat and just try to remember that, is because in many ways it is kind of like a restaurant, because you're going to be incredibly overwhelmed at some points in time, and some points in time it's just going to be you. And I find a lot of solace in food and getting comfortable through my taste buds.
That's such a great answer. And I think about it personally when you brought that up. I'm like, yeah, like I can tell you everywhere I live, I can tell you all the places to go. I even have a list that I share with people. I shared a list with one of our graduates he was moving to Fort Myers, Florida for a job. And I used to live there. I was there for 5 years, and I have a freaking stacked list of places. And I've sent it to people on crews I've worked at that were going down there and stuff. And I sent it to him, and I'm proud of that list. And I think that's a fantastic answer. And I've never thought of that. And I did not expect you to say that. So that makes an even better answer.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm glad that I kind of helped you connect those dots there.
Yeah, well, there's a personal connection to me. Like I felt that, we say connect with people, you connected with me with that. Okay, typical day for you. I know every day is different, but I do like to ask that question a lot in these, because I don't think people necessarily realize what the work day, what the workload is. So take me through maybe a day last week of your job.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a Saturday, because those are typically my most hectic. And I think those are the ones I end up being most proud of, because not only, for one, before you can even start doing anything, I know what shows we're doing. And typically that is a 5:30, which goes statewide, a 9, 9 now because of SNL, because we get time coverage weirdness from NBC for that, and then a 10 p.m. for Cheyenne. So, 3 shows right there. I know that's what we're going to have to do that day. And so then you pull up the schedules, you try to figure out what you got in basketball season and baseball season, especially. You can have very early call times. Like there are some days that I'll go into work at 9 a.m. and I'm not gone until 11 p.m., 12 p.m., midnight. But here recently, when soccer season started, we had a bunch of winter cancellations, so I didn't have to come in until about noon. So you go out there, I go ahead as soon as I get in the door, I build my show just to know kind of how much time I want to give each thing. So that way, when my producer comes in case I'm not in the office, he knows how much time I'm giving for each thing. And then, put batteries in the camera, SD card, grab everything I'm going to need, head out to the first game, which was Central High School here. I go all the way up to the box and take pictures of the roster. I do it every single game because even I can go to 10, 12, 15 East and Central soccer games just in case there's a change in jersey number or a kid's injured or whatever's happening. I'm not missing that. So every time, go take pictures of the roster. Come back down, get you a spot, comfortable in the bleachers, about as close to midfield as you can. We typically go for either 4 goals or halftime. That's our standard, is either you want to have enough in your short span to cover both sides of it, or you covered a whole half of the game and you got to keep moving because you got another assignment. So I ended up getting 4 goals in like 20 minutes from Central. They were doing real well on Saturday. Pack it up, drive all the way across town to East High School because they've got a game going on at the same time. Same deal, run up to the box. Note to self, if you work in a windy place, remember to bring your gloves, because I did not do that. My hands were feeling it on Saturday. Shoot that, get back to the office, chop it all up, write what I need to write. I believe we had the WNIT, which the Wyoming Cowgirls are playing in. We had something to talk about with that. Scoreboards from any games that weren't local, keep up with track, cut it all together, go in 5:30, do your thing, take a second, go get you some food because by that point you do need it, and come back about an hour later, make sure everything's good to go. I believe we had an update on the Nuggets maybe that I needed to update them, and I actually got Vo in for it. Cut that all up for the 9, and then that 30-minute period between your 9 and your 10, you just kind of have to wait around. Then you do your 10, circle back, post your web stories, make sure you're getting every score that you need in there. You write a little synopsis of every game you went to, post that, and then you're done for the day.
I tell you what, you just brought back a lot of good and bad memories, Jackson. So congratulations, because I can identify with all of that. That's for sure.
It's
Especially the cold hand.
hustle. It is a nonstop hustle. Like if you are too relaxed before, if I am too relaxed before 8 p.m., so an hour before our 9 p.m. show, I'm going to start looking for something else to do because I've done something wrong here. If it's gone that easy for you, it probably shouldn't have.
Do you have a favorite memory? What's your favorite memory since you started there from working there?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm trying to think. There's been a lot of cool stuff. I'll go with Tucson. Traveling out to Tucson for the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl, because that's where Wyoming played. Now, that experience was a bit of a nightmare, but it was still very cool to say I did, and to get out there and do, and to just experience traveling for your work and doing committing 3 days of your life to let's make this the best it can possibly be. And obviously Tucson, I got to have Jack in the Box for the first time, since I'm obsessed with food apparently, but that was a cool thing, just seeing different stadiums and being able to do all that. It's something I'm never going to forget.
Work trips are special, and you're right. There is a lot of work. I think people don't realize how much work goes into the workday trips, but I always found time to experience the local place. So I'm glad that you're able to do that, because that's important. You should be enjoying that. All right. Go
The
ahead.
travel is an underrated aspect of that as well. My tripod got lost on that.
Oh.
I was turning content on the travel because we did like a little mini, like minute and a half thing where I would record on my phone, like, hey, it's 1 a.m. I'm driving down to the Denver airport, take video of me in the Denver airport, like keeping track with it. There's just so much that you've got to check off on those trips that you don't realize until you're doing it.
So true. All right, third big question. What do you hope your dreams bring you to as you continue in this business? What are your future dreams?
So, we've talked about it. The NFL draft is a huge one for me. Somebody that I idolize is Rich Eisen. I respect him a tremendous amount. I watch his show quite a bit. His work on the NFL draft, his ability to be in so many different ventures while also still being himself and just really getting to enjoy everything that he feels like he wants to and needs to enjoy in this industry to just keep doing what he's doing that is what drives me. That's the thing that I eventually want to become, is someone who has a platform for one, I would eventually like to be a little bit more off script. I would like to be able to be me, because I think even though I'm writing it, I don't fully get to be myself in script format, but just somebody who people enjoy watching and believe is being authentic and believe is somebody they can relate to. And that's always something that I've strived for. And hopefully that's something I can make a reality.
How do you think what you're doing now is leading you on the path to get there?
On the news side of stuff, on my employer, the community connection is so huge for that. Learning how to be comfortable but also be professional on air. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to be too suit and tie, even though you are wearing one. You don't want to be a suit and tie telling you about sports. You want to be Jackson McCarty wearing a suit and tie, talking to Rishi Barran about how Central High School did today. And finding that balance has been huge. And then on the stuff I do on the side, podcasting and stuff, that is trying to figure out how to be me in front of a camera, talking about things I'm passionate about, but also find the ways that keep people entertained and interested in talking about those things, because it can be very repetitive. That's big focal points for me, is just trying to use that camera to show everybody who I truly am, as opposed to reading words off a prompter.
Good stuff. And we're going to go into our dream sequence now. 3 questions, short form answer, just kind of top of the consciousness answer. And I had stuff prepared, but based on what you were talking about, I've actually come up with new questions as we go through this. All right. So first one, dream NFL quarterback prospect. And what I mean by that is you could have like the brains of one guy, an arm of another guy, the feet of another guy. So construct the dream NFL draft prospect for me.
Okay. Andrew Luck's mentality. I could just say Andrew Luck and be done, but Andrew Luck's thought process, Lamar Jackson's mobility, Josh Allen's size. I think he is the perfect size quarterback, and the arm talent of Mahomes probably, and then the pedigree of Brady. Just just the go out there and get it done.
When you said Andrew Luck, I'm like, well, the one thing he doesn't have was durability. So I guess Tom Brady fits in that category as well.
Yes. We'll take Tom Brady's medical history.
Okay, so this is based on stuff you were talking about too. Dream restaurant to go to on a work road trip. So you can go anywhere, and it's maybe somewhere you've heard of and you've always wanted to go. You get to go. Where are you going?
Okay, so I would kill for somewhere that offers both like barbecue style food and seafood. If I could get some kind of hybrid combination to where I could get a pulled pork sandwich, but also like some grilled shrimp, and like the sides that come with like some, rice pilaf, but also some cornbread and hush puppies. Like if I could just meld those two foods together, I'd be in heaven.
All right. Final question. Going back to you talking about traveling to new places and putting yourself in a new place you've never been, where you want to go to, dream place to visit that you haven't been to yet?
Ooh, somewhere over in England. I am fascinated with soccer culture. I am fascinated with how they treat their UFC fighters, because I'm very big into that sport. I think that fan base and how they approach sports is unlike anything else on this planet, and I would love to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Love it all. Final advice you have for people who want to be like you one day?
Really just you find how to be yourself beyond the script. Because if you are trying to kind of follow in the traditional broadcasting side of stuff, it's easy to get bogged down on the words on the prompter. But if you want to, push past that and truly be the happiest you can be, learn how to be yourself in front of that camera. And no matter where you end up, no matter where you, what sports you end up covering, whatever it is, that is how I believe you get to truly be happy in really any job field, but especially this one.
And that's what it's all about, being happy, and finding yourself means the world, not just in this job, but everything. Jackson, thank you for all your time today. I appreciate it. And I want everybody to know Jackson makes it 20. I said that at the beginning of the show, but thank you again to Jackson McCarty for joining us. I think he's got plenty of big things ahead of him and plenty of big sandwiches ahead of him on his career ahead. We'll be back with episode 21 soon, but I want Jackson to have some time between now and then to continue his draft prep. So I'm sure he'd be happy to talk NFL draft with anybody who wants it. Everybody else, keep on living the dream.